Stoa is a digital campfire where we cohere in dialogue about what matters most at the knife's edge of what's happening now.
Let's begin. Welcome to the Stoa, everyone. I'm Peter Limberg, the steward of the Stoa. The Stoa is a place for us to cohere and dialogue about what matters most at the knife's edge of this very moment. And today we have Anthony Magnabosco, Street Epistemologist extraordinaire. For those of you who do not know what Street Epistemology is, we'll get into that like a brief 101. Anthony was on my former podcast, which was rebranded to the Stoa. We had a good 101, so I'll share that into the chat and the show notes and stuff like that. But yeah, so how today's going to go, we're going to jam, me and Anthony, about street epistemology and then how it relates to the culture war. And if you have any questions, throw them in the chat. And I'll call on you and mute you when we get to the collective questioning portion. If you want me to read it on your behalf, just let me know. Indicate that in the chats, and I will read it on your behalf because this will go on YouTube. Most people are familiar faces here, but there is some newcomers, which is welcome to the Stoa. That being said, I will allow Anthony to unmute himself and take him in. How's it going, my friend? You're on mute right now. There we go.
There we go. Hey, what's going on, Peter? Thanks for having me on your show. I see some familiar faces here. This is great. And a lot of unfamiliar ones, which is even better, honestly. Thanks for having me on your show.
Yeah, my pleasure, man. I've been meaning to get you and SE on. I've been a fan and following, as you know, since I wrote that white paper on the culture war.
Yeah.
Maybe get like a show of hands for those who have their camera on. Who's familiar with SE or Street Epistemology, like the method at all?
So just on the one panel that I saw half the hands go up, but there may be some bias there. They may have been the first to join. Who knows? Interesting.
So maybe like, okay, I'll just hand over to you. What is street epistemology?
Street epistemology is a technique that was started by a philosophy professor in Portland who was familiar with the Socratic method, and I think used it personally with his interactions. And he started realizing, hey, if you use questions to explore claims, you can probably help that person take another look at their views. So he wrote a book called A Manual for Creating Atheists, which he gave a talk at the Freedom from Religion Foundation in 2012. I was just looking at this video. I was in that crowd watching him speak, and where he was talking a little bit about his book. I think I bought his book then, but I may have gotten it later. I don't exactly remember, but it's where you use questions to explore claims with people on sensitive topics. So rather than arguing with people or giving them facts or talking over them or allowing them to misrepresent your position, you basically just let the person that you're talking to explain their position, and you ask them questions to drive down to the reliability of their method. That's it. That's kind of it in a nutshell. It's expanded a lot since he wrote his first book. In fact, he wrote a second book called How to Have Impossible Conversations, which I think, given the two choices, I think I'd advise people to check that book out first, because I think he's taken a lot of the things that we've learned and he's learned since the first book and bake that into his second book. So yeah, it's where you basically explore claims that people make in a respectful way, where you're asking questions. And it's kind of interesting to watch that happen. Most people, I think, can grasp street epistemology better if they watch examples of people doing it rather than just me talking about it. So if you haven't already watched some examples, I'd recommend that you do that. Have you seen a lot of them, Peter?
I've seen a bunch, yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there's nothing like watching people ponder the deeply held belief that they've held for the longest time and start to wonder, why the hell do I think that this is true? And that's usually what happens during these talks.
And so kind of like the historical lineage of it, and we were chatting about this when we spoke last time, I playfully labeled the street epistemologists as like friendly new atheists. Because the new atheists had this vibe. They were very combative, challenging people in religious and the debate stage. And then SE, or people who are trained in it, you know, the social fluency, that, hey, excuse me, you know, I got a few questions, inquiries, and then it's very kind of implying the principle of charity, all these different kind of conversational techniques to make the person comfortable, but then really getting at the core of why they believe what they believe. So do you think that's unfair of me to call it like a friendly new atheist? Like, how would you see that kind of?
No. In fact, I was really excited when I saw that you characterized Street Epistemologists as sort of an offshoot of the new atheist, because I think your characterization of the new atheist movement is fairly correct. It was aggressive. It was in your face, and it held nothing back. And it got a lot of people's attention. I was more comfortable coming out as an atheist and getting involved in the atheist movement or community because I was watching examples of Dawkins and Harris and Dennett, Dillahunty, et cetera. That was really exciting to me as somebody who was watching people walk around with beliefs that I don't think are true. So it got my attention. But what I think happens is that people then try to mimic those aggressive approaches with the people in their lives that they love. And that can really backfire. So the street epistemology approach, I think, is an offshoot of the new. Sometimes we joke around and say the street epistemologist is the new atheist, sort of a nicer, gentler, more empathetic type of atheist. But there are moments where people who are promoters and practitioners of this method, we still slip into our very aggressive ways. It's hard to not debate for the rest of your life. You're still going to probably do that. But if you value the relationship and you want to help the person take another look at their views, it seems like the SE approach is more effective.
And when I wrote the Memetic Tribes Culture War paper, I listed SE as a Memetic tribe on that spreadsheet I shared in the chat. And that's how I think Peter Boghossian tagged you into, like, we got each other's radar, I think, that way. And I've interviewed you and Peter on my podcast. We chatted. And it'd be interesting to kind of discuss the distinction between SE as like a Memetic tribe, as like a tribal constellation, and SE as an actual method.
Yeah, that's an important distinction. And I got really excited when I saw yours. I never thought about a culture war or Memetic tribes until I saw your spreadsheet. And then the light bulb sort of went off for me, like, oh, that's a really interesting way to think about it. And I was really pleased to see somebody looking at street epistemology and seeing it as potentially its own sort of tribe or community or movement. Because since Peter wrote that book in 2012 or 2013, thousands of people are getting into this approach. It's gaining momentum. There definitely is a community. There's thousands of people in a Discord server, or several Discord servers. There's thousands of people on Reddit or Facebook or Twitter that are getting involved in it. But just because you might be in the SE community doesn't mean that, you don't have to be in the SE community to use I'm abbreviating street epistemology to SE. Sorry, I tend to do that. But you can be in any tribe and adopt the tools that are being developed by the street epistemology community. That's the neat thing about what I think we're doing in street epistemology, is that there's this community that's honing these tools for more effective and productive talks. These tools can be used by anyone in any Memetic tribe. In fact, we want people to use these tools. If you learn these tools, I'm hoping that you take them back to your tribe and you teach them how to use them as well. So I think the street epistemology tribe, for a lack of a better nomenclature, I think that works out really good. Like, I think that's a really good, useful way of viewing it, because we're out there, we're hammering away at this, we're trying to put these tools together, and we're encouraging people to use them. And I have some really strong feelings about this tool. I think this tool, honestly, Matt, I think that this tool will be around through the culture war and to the end of it. It will be. It's not going away. It's definitely not going away. So I think the sooner that people in these various tribes learn about this method of communicating with each other, the better. You will have a leg up. Your tribe will have a leg up if you adopt these tools and use them. That's my personal view on it.
And so to echo that, first, if you are not familiar with the method, it's a really tight method. It's a really good method. And do agree it could be repurposed by different sort of tribes. And I even suggested that in a past writing, where like an agnostic, I'm more sort of an agnostic kind of like tribal constellation, if you will, and you can use that, you know, for the SE method for that as well. But like here's like a tough question you asked me. Feel free to give me a tough question.
Please, the harder the better.
Is this sort of like a sneaky Trojan horse on your part? Okay, like, you know, take the method and then you use it, then you're sort of like, you know, if you use it earnestly and honestly and authentically, you'll undermine your own epistemology and foundation.
Great question. I'm really glad that you asked it. Regardless of how I answer this, I think, yes, it is a Trojan horse. I think there's a Trojan horse aspect of it, because once you start using this method on other people's claims, you will use it on your own claims, and you'll start to use it on yourself. So in that aspect, that was one of the most revealing things about this approach, was when you start using it frequently, you turn it on your own views, and you become a lot more careful about what you claim to know is factually the case. And that's an important distinction. Many times we're just giving our opinions. We're stating opinions as fact. But here's my perspective. When people start learning street epistemology, you tend to be a little bit more cautious about what you claim to know is the truth. And you tend to be a little bit more accepting of the claims that people are making, because they probably just haven't thought it through or had anyone kick the tires on the belief that they're holding. So it's been a net positive. So it's a weird Trojan horse in that you almost sort of hop on the horse yourself. You know what I'm saying? Like, you start to realize the benefits of the approach, and then you become a champion of it within your own tribe. And I think that's what's going to happen. People are going to start to see other people talking about racism, veganism, religion, Trump, you name it. But we're having respectful, productive talks. And that's not happening today. I mean, look, almost everything you see on the news, almost everything that you see on YouTube is argument and strawmanning, misrepresenting, tearing people down, trying to make people look stupid. That's not at all what we're doing with SE. This is to get clarity in your position, so that it's clear to yourself, not just to me who's asking you these questions, but to bring clarity to your own views. And that's something that's extremely valuable. Now, there are some holes in the armor, I suppose, of the approach. There's some certain aspects of it that I think are might slow us down a little bit. Like, it's confusing. It could be a little boring. It might be a little tough to learn. It's hard to set aside your ego and set aside your own view when somebody says something that's like I just uploaded a video where somebody said, you can't be moral without believing that there's a God. Well, 3 years ago, I would have lost my shit if I had heard that. But now I just roll with it, and I ask questions, and we end up making progress on it. So there's certain hurdles that I think people have to overcome in order to grasp the method and to use the method. But once you mature enough to understand what's going on with this tool, it changes you, and it changes your interactions for the better. That's been my experience over the 8 years or so that I've been doing this.
Did it sort of weaken or strengthen the belief system that you had going before you learned the method and started applying it?
Which beliefs? Like atheism or something?
Either atheism as a whole, or maybe this certain beliefs that you might have held.
There have been some beliefs that have changed my views on because I've engaged with people on these topics about gun control and abortion and God and all this other stuff. So when you have hundreds and hundreds of conversations where you're using this approach, it does tend to change your own perspective on some things. One thing that I've noticed that it tends to happen to most people who learn this is they tend to back off of their dogmatism on their own views. And that's extremely useful, because now I could be more open to considering somebody else's perspective, that maybe Hinduism is true, or that maybe Trump really is the best president for our country at this period of time. Having an open mind is one of those hurdles, I think, that you have to sort of You have to be willing to adopt that when you use this approach. You have to be willing to say, okay, I actually might be mistaken on these core beliefs that I hold. I should really be open to hearing what they have to say. Now, this isn't agreeing to disagree. This is pushing back, but pushing back in a way where it's respectful and, again, productive.
So the other question I had was about the culture. So the title of this whole talk was Culture War 2.0.
Yeah.
Right? And there's two memes. Like I wrote that white paper called Nomadic Tribes, Culture War 2.0. Then Peter Boghossian wrote something called, he stole the title, and he called Culture War 2.0. And he had a different meaning, which I want to talk about in a moment, about like the great realignment and grievance studies and stuff.
Yeah,
but, how I viewed it is like this multipolar war, like that spreadsheet where there's like multiple different tribes and reality tunnels that are coexisting. And like right now, for example, you have Black Lives Matter, you have Antifa, you have QAnon, you have Extinction Rebellion, you have all these militias, and they are not all buddies with each other. They have odd alliances at times,
they
but
do.
They have different worldviews. And then you hinted earlier that this technique, this method, is going to play a critical role in the culture war. And then, so taking this frame of all these different reality tunnels coming at you, how do you think this could be the case?
All right, that's a good question. And I've never really verbalized this. So listeners, please be a little bit charitable, because I'm still trying to form my vision of how this is playing out. But it seems like this is how I'm envisioning it. Like after I read your spreadsheet, then I've been going out and having talks with people on a wide variety of claims and uploading some of those to my YouTube channel. It seems like some tribes, there's an important distinction when we look at how many tribes are in your spreadsheet now. I haven't checked it recently.
Well, I haven't updated it, but there was like 30 something.
Okay. This is what I would love to see with your spreadsheet. And I think it kind of ties everything together. I would love to see you add a column that says something like views truth in objective terms. Yes, no. The tribes that view truth in objective terms are going to be the ones that make it through the culture war. If you think narrative can be accepted as truth, or you think opinion is the same thing as fact, if you think subjective truth is on equal footing as objective truth, you're probably not going to make it through the culture war. I don't think that that's the case. I think that's a prerequisite. And I think it would be a really fun exercise. And I don't know how you do it, because you could talk to 50 people from a tribe and you might get mixed results, but that's okay. Because the people who view truth in objective terms within those tribes can learn these tools and bring them to the people that don't. That, I think, is going to be the biggest delimiter in those different tribes. So that's one way of looking at it. This is a tool that can be used by anyone in these tribes. Now, you mentioned like alliances. There's some interesting things going on in this culture war. There really are. Like, we're seeing atheists working with theists. What do they have in common? Well, they think that truth is objective. Now, in my view, many theists, I think theists think they have the objective truth, but I don't think that they do. And I've had thousands of conversations with theists who think that they do, and it almost comes down to faith, and that is an unreliable epistemology. We can quibble about definitions and everything, and I'm sure there's a lot of theists that would disagree with that. That no, faith is the thing that you get after you decide that God is real or whatever. But for the most part, what I think is we're going to start, if you watch for this, Peter, I think that this is going to happen. I think you'll notice that the tribes that view truth or agree that truth is objective, they're going to start coalescing. They're going to start working together to, gosh, I hate this metaphor of a battle, but at the moment, it seems like it's the best way of looking at it. Like, I think that these tribes are going to be clashing with each other, and it's largely because of the way that we view the nature of reality and whether we think truth is objective or not. So we're going to start noticing very odd alliances. Those alliances won't last forever, especially when your ally starts slipping into relativism. And it's okay that I believe that's true because I take it on faith and this type of stuff. But for the moment, this is what I think you're going to start noticing. And
this is what sort of, it's like what you said was an extended version of what Peter Boghossian called Culture War 2.0, or the Great Alignment. And let me see if I can get it, and let me know if I got it.
Please, because I maybe I internalize what he said and I'm just repackaging or something, but it's been months since I've read his article. So yeah, if you want to go ahead and paraphrase it or something, I'd be glad to listen to it.
Yeah. And so my understanding of that was pretty much what you said, but he focused more on the kind of Christians and then atheists, and how the atheist movement got split between sort of like the woke social justice stream, and then more of a kind of the liberal side. And then the liberal side, they find this odd alliance with the Christians. And then he says, this is the great realignment. And I think that's similar to what you said, but you have a more expanded scope, like this constellation of tribes are going to merge around kind of epistemology of truth, and one that has maybe like a standpoint epistemology or something like that.
Yeah, I think I take a more broader perspective. This is one thing that I've noticed with Peter and James and Helen and other people who are, they're focusing too much on one tribe. The idea that the problem of subjectivity being accepted as fact is something that cuts across hundreds of groups, millions of people. So again, I've been thinking this through, and Peter always talks about this idea of parrhesia, of like speaking truth in the face of power or something. So, and these are friends of mine. But if you remember back to A Manual for Creating Atheists, this was a book that was teaching this method of street epistemology for atheists to use with theists. It was very narrowly focused, and atheists like myself picked up on it. We started going out and intentionally having conversations with theists to figure out if they have a reliable epistemology for God. And one thing that we quickly realized is that the tool can be used for all different types of claims. In fact, if you look at people who do SE, it's the percentage of people who talk about religion is probably less than 40% now, maybe even 30. We're shifting to political topics. We're shifting to vaccines, mask usage, vegan, eating meat, all this stuff. So just like A Manual for Creating Atheists may have been too narrow or too laser focused on one group, it's conceivable that the grievance studies and this idea, focusing on woke, doing this thing about like what was it called? What was the hoax called? The grievance studies hoax. That was very targeted to one demographic of people. Like, why was that? Like, I understand why they may have selected that, because they're very close to it. They're all, I think, in academia. So it kind of makes sense that they focused on that. But what I'm suggesting here is that we might want to zoom out just a little bit. I think we're focused too much on one group. And I think there's a variety of different groups. There are people in the Republican Party or the Democratic Party, for example, who view truth in subjective terms. And we could be missing that by being so focused on one small aspect, on one small tribe. That concerns me. I think it might be healthy to zoom out a little bit and see what's the main factor here and which tribes is it intersecting, and try to tackle it from a broader perspective. Does that make sense?
Yeah. It reminds me of kind of what happened to Peterson, where, he wasn't really a culture warrior at first, when, like, I knew him before he even entered the whole kind of culture war scene, but he sort of got captured in the battle and got like hardened in it. And I see the same thing with Bokosian and especially James Lindsay with his Twitter game. So, yeah, and so what I'm saying, what I'm getting from you is that by tethering yourself to the methodology and not so much like the battlefield or the battle, like the particular battle, like, and more the methodology, then you can kind of apply it not just to one woke tribe, you can apply it to like the QAnon tribe or the reactionary tribe or whatever.
Right. That's kind of the nature of street epistemology as it is, because once you learn the technique of asking questions like we do in street epistemology, where we don't get so focused on the claim, we're semi-interested in the reasons and making sure that that's the real reason why you think that your claim is true, but it's the methodology that a person is using to verify the quality of their reasons for thinking something is true. That is something that cuts across every type of claim that you can make. So once you learn street epistemology, SE, you'll start to recognize the efficiency of it, because it doesn't even matter the claim. It doesn't matter what claim people are making. What's more important is, did you build this belief on a solid foundation? Let's probe that foundation. How reliable is it? Is your confidence in your claim justified? That's a game changer, because now we're not talking about specific claims or anything at all like that. And it kind of distances the person from the belief. We're no longer talking about your view that God is real, or that so-and-so is the best president, or that we need to start teaching critical race theory in businesses or something. You can actually get down to the reliability of the method that a person's using. And once people start to realize that I'm using a method that's unreliable for this claim, oh shoot, there's 30 other claims that I use that same method for. You start to see how efficient this can be. So this is wildly exciting to see people starting to pick up on these tools and use them in a variety of different fields with a variety of different mimetic tribes.
So I'm going to pivot to the chat. Like, I haven't been following, so please +1 any questions, +1 yourself, so I can kind of like.
Yeah, I'm not following it either. Just so you know, I just heard some thunder, so hopefully we don't lose the power or anything here.
Cool. So I'll ask one more question. Paul Vanderklay came on last week. It was a really great session. We called it Being a Christian in Culture War 2.0. And he said something that was like, I'm like, wow, like it gave me pause. He said that culture wars are great practice for being a Christian. Because the Christians are the only tribe, in his opinion, that loves their enemies. So it's like kind of like practicing that Christian love. And then, like, I'm not here to dispute that claim, but the question is there, for someone in SE, do you think that's a healthy frame to have, that the culture war is a good practice, and if so, what to practice what?
Excuse me. Well, in order to be good at street epistemology, you need to approach it from a place of empathy, which I suppose is similar to love. You have to like or love people if you care enough to engage with them about the claims that they're making. That might be one of the best expressions of love, is to gently push back when somebody says something that's questionable. So, I mean, listen, Christians don't have a lock on love, okay? You can be a loving human being and not believe in any gods. So let's dispatch with that notion right away. What you need to do to be good at this and be successful at respectfully interrogating claims is to take your ego and set it aside. So if Christians can do that, they're going to be really good at SE. If Muslims can do that, they're going to be really good at SE. If Hindus can do that, or atheists can do that, or whatever, you're going to probably be really good at SE. So I guess that there sort of is an element of love when you do this. Like, you can use this tool and use it to harm people, I suppose, or bash them, or make yourself feel good by watching somebody struggle to answer questions. I suppose that's the case. But generally, I think most of the people that I've met that get into this do this because they want to help other people. And not from the point of view of like, I've got it all figured out, so let me go help these poor misled folks. Like, I want you, Peter, to learn this method to challenge me on the claims that I make. I want Paul to learn these tools so that he can use it the next time he's talking to a Mormon or a Muslim or an atheist.
Cool. All right, so let's pivot to the chats.
Okay.
Christian wants me to read this on his behalf. What is Anthony's thought?
A Christian? I'm sorry, did you say a Christian or
no,
somebody
the
named Christian?
The Christian, yeah. So what is Anthony's thoughts on metaphorical truth? I think this is Brett Weinstein's term. I don't know if you're familiar with it.
Yeah.
And I'm asking this because I wonder if the pursuit of truth is Anthony's highest value.
The pursuit of truth, I don't think we could ever know anything for sure. So I don't think we'll ever actually be able to touch the truth. I think we can get fairly close to it, but the pursuit of it is one of my highest values. Yeah. And figuring out which views that I'm holding that I can't justify to myself, and getting rid of those. So that is one of my highest values, is objective. And yes, I've heard of metaphoric truth and what's the other one I heard? Dramatic truth. The most recent video that I uploaded, somebody was mentioning, well, do you mean dramatically true? I'm like, no, I mean like the objective factual truth of the matter. So I do see a lot of people. It's really interesting. It's really, really interesting what I'm noticing with theists, where I think theists realize that this is a bold claim, and I'm willing to have somebody challenge me on this later. But theists, it seems, they don't have evidence to back up their claim. Many people base their theistic views on faith, which when we define it, we realize it's probably an untestable trust, and that is unreliable. And now what I see is lots of theists getting really excited about this idea of dramatic truth, or what did you call it? What was the other one that did you call it dramatic truth? Metaphoric truth. I have these little box of Tic Tacs. Have you seen these running around the internet lately? We've been throwing memes up and stuff. Sometimes we meet people who say, it's true to me because I get value from it. Or it's my truth, that type of stuff. I'm a better person because I think that it's true, and that's good enough for me to think that it's true. So when we meet people who view truth in subjective terms like that, we usually ask something like, do you think the total number of pieces in this box is either even or odd? And it can't be both. That one little simple thought experiment can help people realize that they are viewing truth in objective terms for most everything else in their life. But when it comes to the deeply held beliefs that are important to them, suddenly there's this valuable dramatic truth or metaphoric truth that suddenly becomes available to them, and they glom onto it because it's so lovely and beautiful, and it makes me feel good. And I'm allowed to now have this belief because I'm now redefining truth to allow me to have it. You can do that. But for the people who are sitting at the mimetic tribes that are sitting at this big round table of infinite seats, in order to sit at that table, you need to view truth in objective terms. There's a seat waiting for you. We want you there. Okay? But there's a hurdle that you have to overcome to sit there. And that is the recognition that while metaphoric truth or dramatic truth might make you feel good, it's not a reliable way for coming to the actual truth of the matter.
Cool. Is there anybody do you have a follow-up for that? Oh yeah, Christian didn't. I read on his behalf. Okay. Raine, I'll call on you for the next question.
Now, I should also add though, I do think that there are people who need to hold on to beliefs that they can't justify to themselves or other people, because they think that they may become a bad person, and maybe they really think that maybe they really would become bad. Hold on to your dramatic truth, okay? But you might want to back off of your involvement with the big decisions that need to be made in our culture. Leave that to the people who view truth in objective terms. Now, again, these are ideas that have been eating at me for years now. And it wasn't really until I saw your spreadsheet and started thinking about all these different tribes and how they're viewing these things that it's sort of coalescing. I could be way off on this. I don't think that I am, though. I really think that this is a really useful lens to kind of look at it through.
Raine, you had a question.
Hey, Anthony.
Hey.
I wanted to ask about objectivism, because you've used that word a bit. And I'm curious if you have a distinction between objectivism and scientific materialism. And I'm curious what you think about a sort of pure empiricist view, like the only thing that's real is what we can measure and observe.
I always hold out a little bit of myself to be open to the idea that there might be something more than the physical world that we can rigorously test as best we can. Well, test as best we can using the tools of the scientific method. But I don't know how we would actually be able to verify that it's the case without some sort of scientific or rigorous testing process to see if it's the case. So I'm open to hearing, and I've talked to thousands of people who think that there's a supernatural realm or there's something more than this one world or this one life that we have. I haven't become jaded on it, let me just say, but when you run into so many people who hold views that they can't test, methodologies that they can't test the reliability of, yet they're so confident that they have the factual truth of the matter, it's quite frustrating to see it time and time again. So that's kind of how I view things. Yeah, I think the time to actually hold a high degree of confidence in the truth of something is when it could be demonstrated to be the case. Why would we want to do anything else? Now, I'm open to there being a God or there being some sort of supernatural realm, or maybe karma really is real or something along those lines. But if we can't demonstrate it to be the case, we probably shouldn't be so confident that it's factually true.
Can I follow up on that, Peter? Thanks, that makes sense. I'm a realist for what it's worth, so I don't tend to fall on the supernatural side of things so much. But I'm wondering about again that sort of objectivism as the independent truth of things, that they're true independently of us, of the observer. Mm-hmm. And so like everything you said about being able to verify those claims seems to, I agree that's the only way to get to truth, but the verification process itself would seem to involve a subjective observer. Have you thought about that problem of where the subjective observer fits in with the objective scientific study?
Yeah, you're always going to have that element of individuals observing what's happening and then their subjective interpretation of it. But it seems like if there's attributes of repeatability, of testability, defeasibility, seeing if other people can reproduce your results that are from different cultures or different tribes. Yes, you'll still always have those biases that we bring to it. I don't think that there's a way that we can ever completely mitigate for our own biases. We're going to always bring that to the table, unfortunately. But if we're aware of it and we try to mitigate it, and we recognize that it could be influencing our perception of the true reality of the situation, that's what we need to do. But that's not what we're seeing. We don't tend to see that a lot these days. We tend to see a lot of people who say, well, that's been my experience, so therefore it's a fact that affects everybody because of my own personal experience. It's a very dangerous way of looking at the world and interacting with the world. And that's the thing that I think is so useful about this dialectical approach, is that it tries to reframe things, I think, from an objective observer's point of view. I should also mention that like when I talk to somebody and use this approach, I'm completely open to them using the same technique on my own views, and maybe uncovering some biases that I have. Maybe I'm a little bit more skeptical when it comes to theistic claims that I should be. That's something that I probably never would have admitted 5 years ago or 6 years ago. But having practiced this method, you start to realize the frailties of your own perceptions of things. So yeah, I don't know if I want to add anything more to that.
All right. Let's go, Paul. You had a question about emotional intelligence.
Yeah, so it seems like a major piece of this, if I'm getting it right, is the emotional intelligence required to sort of be curious, and rather than sort of defensive about your own beliefs and sort of putting that aside. Maybe give the Cliff's Notes version, and I can go to the website later, but what's the Cliff's Notes version of how SE deals with that? Because I think everybody's coming from a different place in their life and their own EQ. Maybe just talk a little bit about that.
Okay. That's a really good point. And if you look at my earlier videos, my emotional intelligence was very nascent. It was very, very immature. I was still developing it. I was still trying to crush my opponents with facts and data. The best way to get good at street epistemology, where you're using questions to respectfully challenge people's claims in a productive way, I think almost requires a certain level of maturity to be good at it. Now, there are people who understand the techniques, like, oh, I understand like where the conversation should probably go and what's a good question to ask. But what tends to happen is that practitioners of this approach, they tend to let their own emotions get in the way. So it's been a really kind of humbling experience over the years. I was just counting on my fingers before this call. I think it was like, I've been doing this for like 7 years and having hundreds of conversations with people. One thing that's been really helpful in helping me mature as a practitioner of this method and developing my own emotional intelligence is having a talk, uploading it to YouTube, and then watching people critique me. And you guys look at YouTube comments, right? They're not usually very nice. So I was getting some very blunt, direct feedback as far as what I was doing, how I was doing it. She looked really uncomfortable when you asked those questions. Why didn't you end the conversation sooner? There are certain things that you find yourself developing when you not only practice this approach, but you have other people in the community giving you feedback. And then also watching yourself later, like recording yourself. Just a little quick tip for somebody who wants to try this. Pretend that 100 people are watching you when you're having your next conversation. You'll probably notice that you're going to be on your probably a little bit nicer behavior, a little bit more charitable in your interpretations. And that, I think, you might actually be able to sort of tweak your emotional intelligence by sort of framing it in that way. But it's definitely something that I think people might naturally have. Some people naturally have it, some people don't. But for the people that don't naturally have it, I'm optimistic that you can overcome your own handicaps and develop your emotional intelligence. I do think that that's possible. It's not easy, and it might become more natural to some people than others. But I definitely think it's doable, and I definitely think it's probably one of the most important factors in being good at SE is learning how to human. Be a human, see other people as human beings. If you can do that, you're going to be really good at this.
Cool. Any follow-up, Paul?
No, I'm good. Thank you. That was great.
Yeah, thanks, Paul. Appreciate it.
Dan Feldman, you had 20 questions. Do you want to pick one?
I don't know if I had. Did I have a question? Can you copy and paste an actual question I asked down
There was,
below?
I actually did.
I think there was one that was an actual question, but I think that was an early one and it may have already been answered.
Possibly.
So,
I was just gonna say, I think we also may have some volunteers dropping in links to certain groups, or like we have a website for this and a Discord server and a Reddit and all this stuff. So if this is even remotely intriguing to your followers, Peter, like there's a ton of resources out there for people who want to learn more about it.
yeah, we'll drop a few links. I think the links are just being populated right now.
Okay.
Dan, did you have any kind of statement or follow-up? Your questions were...
Yeah, I mean, I guess I do coaching. I do executive and professional coaching, and I've also been involved with empathy circles and I think just Socratic question. I was trained as an engineer and also, with science and stuff like that. And so to me, Socratic questioning just seems like the natural way of behaving in the world. And I think it's also one of the ways in which I've encountered a lot in my life, just people who say outlandish things. And so it's my way of like engaging with them where I turn off my own position. Like I don't I don't care what's true or not. Let's play with this. But usually what happens is contradictions are revealed, and then you go further in those questions. And depending on how emotionally intelligent the other person is, they either get angry at you or walk out of the room, or if they're open and they are committed to an ideal or a value such as integrity and soundness and honor and things like that, then they will actually try to discover what the truth is with you. But I don't know. Yeah.
Yeah, I could probably.
What do you find with regard to that in your encounters, I guess, with the world and your approach?
My experience tells me that people do want to believe true things, and that when it comes down to it, people, in my experience, people do want to believe true things, and they often think that they have the truth. But then there's another layer, I guess, of people who say, I'm starting to understand that I don't have good reasons for thinking that it's true, but it's more important for me to hold this belief and think that it is. Like the value that I get from it supersedes the need for me to be holding on to objectively true beliefs. So in that respect, like there's different people. I've met people who say, I think karma is real. And 5 minutes later, just after them defining what it meant, they said, I don't believe that anymore. Like that's an interesting quality to see in people. But then again, some people they feel that they've been wronged in their lives, and there's this sense of justice that needs to be there. And I can't interact with the world unless I think that there's karmic punishment happening, because like I don't have the resources to get back at my attacker, but karma is going to take care of it. So there are some people who they're trapped in their own deception, and they're happy being there. And that's a disturbing thing. Sometimes when you practice this enough, you find that you need to actually vent to people who also practice it, because it could kind of mess with your mind when you start realizing how many confidently, I don't mean the word ignorant in a bad way. Look up the definition. That's how I'm using it. Confidently ignorant people navigating the world and voting, and they're teaching their kids these things, and we're in a tough spot. Things are not looking good for humanity here. We need to get our shit together. So people who are approaching these conversations with others that they disagree with from a place of love and empathy, and they use these tools, and they can stick in the conversation long enough to keep their own ego out of it and be a mirror to the person that they're speaking to, that is what I think is going to help break the impasse that we're currently in. And again, this isn't just something for atheists or the street epistemologists. The street epistemology community is developing these tools, but we want people across the spectrum to learn them, and not just learn them, use them, and maybe even help us develop them further. That's the conundrum that I think we're at now. Like, we've been developing this thing, and I think we've got it pretty good. And we may look back in 5 years and just cringe at the way that we're doing it, but that's okay. Like, we're heading in the right direction. People are learning it, and people are being entertained by it, and people are kind of curious about it, and they're seeing these videos and maybe even having good conversations. But if we can't get people from the understanding phase to the usage phase, it's not going to really make much of a difference. We need to actually start using it and implementing it and teaching people how to do it, and make it acceptable to have a 30-minute respectful dialogue on one claim, rather than jumping from one claim to the other, and going for views. And the more bombastic this conversation is, the more people will look at it. That's crushing us right now. Okay, I'll stop talking about that. That's my little hobby horse.
Cool. I had a question. Anjan actually, just when I was thinking it, he dropped a quote from Ken Wilber that went along the lines of, no one is smart enough to be 100% wrong, right? It's kind of like people, the broken clock thing tells the time right twice type thing. And so do you think there's a risk at, like, if someone has the wrong epistemology or not a clear one, dismissing their worldview wholesale even though they might arrive at the truth through various different means, like they might have stumbled on it. And if you just sort of like, oh, you don't have the right epistemology, go away. And then that could be an area that you're not even focused on because it's not an interest. So do you think there's a risk to this method?
Yes. So what I think you're getting at there is, let me summarize what I think you're saying, and then correct me if this isn't it. That's like an essay question too. But what I think you're saying is, could somebody use the approach of street epistemology and help a person lower their own confidence in a claim that they think is true, and it really is true? Yeah. That can absolutely happen, and it does occasionally happen. And when it does, I feel a little bad. But again, I don't really know what the truth is either. But somebody could discover that I have an unreliable way of concluding that God is real, and because I've determined, oh gosh, that really is a horrible methodology, I should probably be less certain in that claim. The claim could still be factually true. But what we're hoping with this approach is that we can, maybe this is sort of like a process of elimination of methodologies. Okay, like, well, faith as I'm defining it there is of just believing without evidence. Maybe that's like an unreliable thing, but what's a better way of justifying my reasons than faith for that claim? Maybe I can be inspired to go find better reasons and more reliable epistemologies for confirming those reasons. And I can really have a really truly justified confidence in this claim. But that is a risk. Like, there's one video that I uploaded where it was like a 10-minute talk, and there was this woman walking around this campus, and she was trying to get people to register to vote. It's an extremely valuable thing. And she walked up to me. I think it was our second talk. The first talk was about karma or something, or the law of attraction. But she wanted to talk about why everybody should vote. And by the end of a 10-minute talk, she said, maybe it's really not so important that people vote or not. And I let her walk away with that thought because I'm sort of a purist in that way. Like, let her go and figure it out. Now, maybe we lost out on her registering 5 or 10 more people for voting that day. There could be some serious or significant fallout, I suppose, of backing off on claims that are true, but because we have an unreliable epistemology, we lower our confidence in it. I think that can happen. But I guess I'm optimistic. I think that risk is a lot less of an issue than running around with beliefs that we're certain are true because they're based on really faulty epistemologies. But I'm willing to, we have people who are watching what we're doing in street epistemology, and some people are very excited about it, like I am. And some people have some concerns about it too. We don't just shun the people who have criticisms. We want to encourage that. This approach has gotten better from people surfacing their concerns about the approach. Pull up a video from 5 years ago of somebody doing street epistemology, and then try pulling up a video of it today. And I think you'll notice that it's moving in the right direction. Right, great question, by the way. These are really good questions.
Like, if anyone has any questions. So Raine, I want to hold on to that question. I have another juicy question. The chat's going crazy right now, so I can't even follow it.
Juicy.
So yeah, maybe something about bias. That's what's coming up to piggyback on what you just said. Yep. And so I have an acting background in improv and whatnot. And then one thing, when you go into improv, especially, you really get a sensitivity, like a somatic sensitivity on status, on like status games. And then when you kind of sniff out when people are playing status games. So I wonder if there's like a status bias in something like, so Michael, I think Barkman, he's a conspiracy theorist, political scientist, and he has a term called stigmatized knowledge. And basically it's knowledge that it kind of exists outside of like established institutions like academia or, like New York Times or whatever. So these are like wild conspiracy theories, woo, all that type of stuff. And I noticed that there's like a bias towards stigmatized knowledge that some people have. It's like a knee-jerk reaction. Anything that falls outside of established authority is just forget about it. And then on the flip side, there's people that anything that is from established authority, they just knee-jerk rejection of it. And I find like there's like a status move on either, like weirdly on either side of it. So I'm wondering if street epistemology flags that kind of like inherent bias? Because I don't know about the SE community, but I know people on the new atheist community, they had sort of that, anything that stigmatized knowledge, I'm not even going to look at it. In case in point, like the QAnon, I'm definitely not a QAnoner, but they were talking about Epstein, for example, like almost a year before he was kind of brought into light what he did. And if you just dismiss that whole movement, you might have missed something that was happening there.
I'm not entirely sure what you're asking me. So can you phrase it as a question?
Yeah. So I guess how like bias and like an attachment to status could make you dismiss certain claims.
Yeah.
And then does street epistemology bring awareness to your own bias?
It definitely, well, I can only sort of answer that for myself. It's definitely brought attention to my own bias. So like, for example, I was actually reluctant to talk about my view of James and Peter because they're friends of mine. We've hung out together. You know, we help each other occasionally on various projects. Not so much James, but probably more Peter. But I see the liability that bias has, and I guess personally I'm sort of willing to acknowledge it and try to overcome it. But it's alluring. Bias is alluring. You might think something is more true because the person that tweeted it has more followers than you would expect, or something like that, or they have a blue check mark. So yeah, I think there is a tendency to weight the things that we're hearing more. There's definitely I think a psychological tendency to give more weight to the things that just confirm what we already think is the case. But that is definitely something that we're aware of when we're having these conversations. Sometimes we have entire conversations about bias. I think I uploaded a video where that's all we talked about. It was in the context of like school exams or something, but it became useful later when we shifted to his claim that God was real. And we started talking about, well, like, what bias do I have as a questioner? What bias do you have as the claimant? How do we mitigate our biases? How do we try to account for those? My friend Reed, who's actually in here, I know he was doing a virtual reality SE. I think he was testing out using VR goggles, and you can't really, you can go out in public, but some people don't want to. And he had this wonderful conversation with these young people. He was in a VR room, and what was the claim? Like, he noticed this girl that he was talking with said that she saw a TikTok where somebody was moving things with their mind. And I think one of the main justifications for thinking that it was true is because this person had a lot of followers. So this is something that we see time and time again in these interactions. And yeah, we definitely want to acknowledge it and point it out, but not in a way where it's demeaning. It's like, you know, if you were raised in a different culture, do you think that you might be viewing your claim differently today? That's a question that we often ask that kind of gets to the heart of bias.
And this goes to your point too, that it would be good that a lot of the Meg tribes had this tool, because they might have a bias that's opposite than, you know, the bias that are someone from the atheist camp, and then they can apply it to each other.
Yeah, what I'm hoping is that there will be people, there are probably skeptical, emotionally intelligent people in every tribe on your sheet, and tribes that you haven't even mentioned yet. I'm hopeful that this method will appeal to those folks and they bring it in. So almost like a Trojan horse of sorts, but like, it's not a nefarious Trojan horse, because I think like it's a really respectful, useful tool. When I hear people critique the method, they almost always don't fully understand it, or maybe they're thinking about like an older description of what this approach is, or maybe they've seen people who hold their views get challenged in a way that makes them uncomfortable because, you're just picking on somebody because they're not as well versed in this topic or something. I'm optimistic that people will see the value of this tool regardless of what mimetic tribe that you're in, and they'll grasp it and they'll help us develop it. This has always been sort of a community thing, and I don't anticipate that ever changing. Yes, we've started a nonprofit for this, in which, by the way, I'm not talking, this is just Anthony as somebody who's an aficionado of SE talking to you, Peter. But we do have a nonprofit for you know, trying to put some money behind this, trying to study this, trying to help get this out to people, regardless of what tribe you're in. I don't care what tribe you're in. If you want to learn this method, and promote it to members of your own tribe, I'm going to be there to help you do that. I want to help you. I don't care what tribe you're in. I want people to learn this approach.
So we are at the hour. We're not in any rush here, and there's still a few questions. Would you want to stay another 50 minutes, or you want to close it off?
However long it takes. Let's get through them all. I mean, I'm
cool. So,
yeah,
well,
I've been wanting to talk about this for a while, so this is really kind of cathartic for me too.
Cool. Okay, it's getting juicy. So we'll be here another 15, 30 minutes. Feel free to come and go as you wish.
Yeah.
Albert Kim, you had something about values, which is kind of cool. If you want to speak on that. Albert Kim.
Oh yeah. Sorry, I completely forgot what you're talking about. Values.
Oh yeah. So you had a question on about neo-Nazis using it, and which gesture towards values.
Oh yeah. So I was picking up on what Raine was asking. Her question was, is street epistemology moral? And there was a bit of an argument, and well, not an argument, like coming to a greater truth. And my stance was, I believe that it's not inherently moral. It's not necessarily coming to something higher or better, because I believe that a skilled practitioner can bypass truth seeking and weaponize SE, so they could give off the pretense that they're seeking a greater truth while manipulating someone else. So I was wondering your thoughts on that.
Yeah, that's a really good point, and it's something that we frequently discuss in the various SE communities, whether it's Reddit or Discord or Facebook or whatever, or even privately. We have chats like, how can we make this more ethical? How can we build in an ethical component to this? I don't know the answer to that, other than maybe pointing you to the things that you may notice that we're trying in our interactions. One thing that at least I try to do is I try to be extremely transparent when I start. Maybe people don't understand what I do, but I usually start up a conversation with somebody. I have a camera, and I'll explain that I'm looking to surface a claim that they make that they think is true, that I can respectfully challenge with questions. So I try to be very, I guess I try to sometimes I even over-explain, but I try to explain what they're getting into and having them consent in. Now, they may still be consenting to something that they think is what's going to happen. Like they think that maybe this is a little puff piece and I can sort of share my narrative, my story, and I'm going to get this nice, warm, fuzzy feeling. And then by the end of it, they're like, oh gosh, I didn't realize it was going to go that way. I suppose that could happen. There have been times where people said, I think I'd rather look at your videos first and then come back and do a talk. And people have done that and they don't come back, or people have done that and they do come back. So I think trying to explain exactly what you're attempting to do with these questions is probably one of the things that helps make this more ethical. But I also think that if you over-explain what you're doing, you can confuse people, and that you don't want to confuse people. I don't want anyone confused. I want clear-headed, rationally thinking as best as possible, and try to minimize the emotion of the talk as much as possible. So tricking somebody into a dialogue is not something that I'd recommend. Obtaining consent, I think, is really important. And maybe on the flip side of that, after the talk, ask them if they want to ask you questions back, because it can be a two-way. And then give them a way to contact you later, because sometimes these conversations can be so unnerving, maybe. They're very thought-provoking conversations. And if you suddenly discover after a 10-minute talk, I can't justify this belief, not only to that stranger with the camera that was asking me these questions, but I can't justify it to myself anymore. That could be extremely upsetting to people who have views that are tied to their identity. So myself, and I think the community at large, we're open to considering ways to make this more ethical. Just one more thing on that, unless you want to go deeper. I think it's kind of interesting that this topic of the morality of the approach, or the ethics of it, comes up for street epistemology and it doesn't come up with debate or arguing or ridiculing. People really seem to be concerned about the ethics of it when they watch the encounters or they see what we're doing with this, which I think might suggest that there's something really profound about it. But then again, like, we may look back in a number of years and think, you really missed some critical things. You should have said this, you should have done that. Maybe we reach a point where there's a code of ethics or something. But you have to remember, these are just people that have read a couple books and have started having talks, and we're kind of coalescing as a community. We're at the very early stage of this thing, and I don't know where it's going. I think I know where it's going in terms of the culture war and all this, but it's gonna keep evolving. It's evolved tremendously in the last 5 years.
Do you have a follow-up, Albert?
Yeah, that was awesome. Thank you, Anthony. Just the thing that I got from that is, because when I think about this, I think that we're all very prone to biases. So I think it's just very difficult for us to go into any one of the like a street epistemology session and really in truly good faith not be trying to convert someone, because like everyone has their own belief structures, and we could profess that, oh, I'm trying to get to a higher truth. I think that it's extremely difficult for that to be the case. Yeah, so I was just that's just what I thought about this.
No, I think that's a really good point, because some of us can be, once you do this enough, especially if it's a repetitive claim that people make, like living in Texas, I run into a lot of theists. I've become really, really good at having conversations with theists and driving fairly quickly down to the reliability of their method, and possibly leaving them with a pebble in their shoe so that they can figure it out on their own. That might also sort of lean towards the ethics of this, is like, generally when we have a conversation with somebody and they discover on their own, using their own terminology and reasons and methods, and it's not a misrepresentation at all. It's like we want to try to be a mirror to the stuff that we're hearing from the person. Once they discover, or they begin to sort of realize that maybe I can't justify my confidence in this claim, that's typically when we end the talk, so that they can go and think about it, or maybe talk to a pastor or an imam, or sit on it for a year before they feel comfortable talking about it again. I think it would be harder to say that this is an ethical endeavor if you noticed us taking advantage of somebody who's in a state of doubt. That, I think, that's crossing a line there. I hope we never see SE reach the point where people are weaponizing it. But you have to remember, it is a tool. It can be weaponized. But like I said, I think in order to be good at it, you sort of have to approach it from a place of empathy. And I don't know if you can you still be empathetic and unethical? Maybe you can. I think it might be a little bit more difficult. Yeah.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Anthony.
Sure thing. Oh, I was going to say, can I just add one more thing? Like, a good question to ask if you are wondering about whether it's ethical to challenge somebody on their views is, you can just explain to them totally what you're planning to do. I learned this technique. It's called street epistemology. Some people even are wondering whether it's ethical. It's where you ask questions and it might leave you in a state of doubt or wonder. But then again, if you share too much, you could be priming them for that kind of response. So this is very tricky. This is a very good question to ask. Like, say something like, or ask something like, is it important for you that your beliefs are as close to the factual truth of the matter as possible? Do you value that? And see what they say. You may be surprised by the response that you get, but generally if somebody says, yeah, like, I do want to believe, I want my beliefs to align with truth as much as possible, that's usually a green light. If I'm ever in doubt whether I should engage with somebody, that's usually something that I'll try. If they say that they want to believe true things and they're willing to pay the they're willing to rebuild if they have to and maybe pay the cost of that, then I usually progress. But I go at the speed that they're comfortable with. That's another, I guess, challenge of this. I'm sorry, I feel like I'm rambling here, but I also feel like I'm sharing some useful stuff. It could be really tempting to go really fast at this approach when you get good at it, because, it's like the writing's on the wall. It's so evident, but they just haven't discovered it yet. So sometimes you can be so proficient with this approach that maybe you can actually hurt people by doing it. So check with your conversation partner frequently. Do you mind if I ask you 2 more questions? Or, I noticed that you kind of crossed your arms there. Would you like to wrap it up, or is this getting too uncomfortable for you? You can do that. So check in with your conversation partner and make sure that they're okay with what you're doing.
I'm wondering if there's another value that's needed that's equally as strong as the value for truth, seeking truth. Because what you described there kind of relates to what Paul asked about emotional intelligence, kind of like having a feel of where someone's at, and then having care.
Learning to read people a little bit too.
But the question is, so the question is, you're just instrumentalizing that skill set in order to get to the truth. That's one thing. Or do you think there has to be an equal value that engenders that care naturally?
For the practitioner, you mean?
Yes.
I don't see how you could become a practitioner of this method if you don't yourself value the truth of the matter. So I think that's probably a prerequisite, is that you yourself value truth and you yourself are willing to pay the cost of abandoning a view that you can't justify to yourself, even though it might ostracize you from the very tribe that you identify with. How many of us who are watching or listening had to do that? It's not an easy thing. You have to rebuild. You might have to find new friends. You might have to learn a new language, so to speak, like new lingo. It could be scary to realize that I can't justify this belief, and I need to find a new tribe, a tribe of people who question, who value uncertainty and doubt, and see dogma as problematic. The community is there. We're out here. There are people who do that. But that's sort of as a prerequisite. You have to value truth, and I think you have to respect that other people's value of truth are different, and respect that as much as you can. It could be upsetting when you see people who are like, I don't care if it's true or not. I can sleep better at night when I go to bed thinking that the creator of the universe is watching over me, and they really mean it. It could be a little disheartening, but I guess I'm more optimistic that more people do want to believe the truth of the matter, despite the cost.
I guess, let me see if I can rephrase my question, is that, like, truth is a key value of a street epistemologist, a key value of yourself, and it's a value that that you're, gesturing towards strongly when you are engaged in this method. But does it need to be held by another value? Something that, a value that naturally engenders care, empathy, like Paul van der Klee talked about love. Or are you just instrumentalizing empathy and all this stuff in order to get that value of truth?
Leveraging empathy in order to have a really good talk. Ooh, I mean, that's probably something every person who learns this approach is going to have to answer for themselves. Like, am I leveraging the empathy that I have, that I'm capable of, to challenge people's views that I happen to disagree with? I think it can be used that way. You can weaponize this approach. You can probably use it for nefarious means. I don't think that I'm doing that. Like, I think that when I'm talking with people about their views, I'm genuinely interested in their reasons and their methods, and helping them discover that they're bad reasons, like their poor reasons and their unreliable epistemologies. Like that excites me when I can see somebody thinking about a deeply held belief and giving it some thought. Like, you're asking some good questions here. Like that's a really fun, it feels good. But, on the same hand, you have to sort of recognize that your questions, the types of questions that we ask can be problematic for some people. You could actually harm people I think, with this approach. You have to be focused. You have to be really paying attention to the dialogue that you're having. I think that's my own view. I think that there are some practitioners of SE are like, forget the consent, forget the ethics of it. Like, I just want to see people squirm a little bit when I ask them, why they're not wearing their mask at Walmart or something. There are some people who sort of enjoy that, but I don't know. Like, a big part of me sort of realizes that I am very likely holding views of reality that I cannot justify to myself. I want people to help me figure that out so I can stop putting as much weight on those views that are influencing my behavior. And I guess I sort of assume that people feel the same way, but you can't. You really need to sort of have almost maybe sort of like an agreement at the start. This is what I'd like to talk about. Here's the potential outcomes, maybe. I'll be here for you after if you need it. But whether or not, maybe you're asking some good questions. I don't know if I could answer that question any further than I've already brought you there.
And I guess the metaphor that comes to mind is like martial artists, at least the traditional martial artists, like they teach you to be effective with your body. But they have, this whole ecology of values that are surrounded by that, like honor, integrity, in order not to disabuse or abuse, I should say, that skill set.
Well, street epistemology, people who are into psychotherapy may notice some similarities. I'm actually curious if there's anyone here who has experience in motivational interviewing or psychotherapy. There seems to be some parallels there, but one thing that I noticed that people who are psychotherapists, they have a formal education. There may actually be a code of ethics. I don't actually know if that's the case, but I would think that if you're a professional psychotherapist, you probably, is that the case? I don't know. Like, I'm thinking that there's a professional aspect to some of these techniques where there's some oversight, there's some standards, and we don't have that here. Like, again, people are reading books, they're watching videos, and they're attempting it. And we're like seeing what's working and what's not, and we're refining it. There's no ethics board at the moment for SE. I don't know if there ever will be, or if there should be. Maybe we'll be kicking ourselves that we didn't set something up sooner. I don't know. But I think if we, always at the back of my mind, I'm thinking if we tighten this down too much at the start, it could limit our ability to creatively evolve it. So maybe at the start, it might be a little bit unethical. I don't know. Like, maybe the ethicalness of this will sort of increase as our formalization of the process increases too. I'm not exactly sure, but the thing that's getting people's attention and the thing that's developing this approach further is that there really are no rules at the moment. I don't know if that's a good or a bad thing. My sense is that it's a really good thing, because
I think we lost you, Anthony. Can anyone else hear Anthony? Give me a little, no? Wait a couple of moments and then we might close out because we passed 50-minute mark. I was getting some juicy territory. Storm took them out, maybe. Thunderstrike. Hope it wasn't a direct one. Okay, so I'm going to put Anthony in the waiting room, bring him back in, see if he comes back. If not, Anthony, are you there? You gotta unmute yourself. Oh, you're on mute still, Anthony. You gotta unmute.
Okay, there we go.
You're back.
You think I'm a novice at this? I just got up to check and see what was going on, and it turns out that my wife just got home from work and she said that it's raining outside, so I guess it might be weather related. I don't know where I dropped off there, but yeah.
Yeah, like I can't remember where you dropped off either. How about we end off with one more question, and then the thing I wanted to say with that is that, just to summarize what I heard, it's sort of like a code of ethics hasn't been developed or hasn't naturally emerged that's kind of commonly agreed upon, because the focus has been refining the method and the excitement about that. And then there was an interesting point that you made, that if you focus too much on the code of ethics, that kind of might ameliorate the focus on the actual kind of improvement of the method.
That's my concern. I don't know if it's warranted or not. Like, maybe we can do both at the same time, where we're integrating a code of ethics into the application of the approach, while at the same time we're still encouraging experimentation and development. I mean, maybe it's possible. My sense is that this is maybe where it dropped off, but I think my sense is that we're probably in a really good spot now, where all sorts of people from around the world and all sorts of different tribes are learning the approach, and they're practicing it. And then hopefully they're sharing what seems to be working, what's not. Like that's a really good spot to be in, but will we always be here? I don't know. We might actually see some sort of codified standard of ethics or something to be a practitioner, but like, okay, so we come up with it. How do you enforce it? Like, are we going to throw people in jail for, not following the Street Epistemology code of ethics? So it almost seems kind of funny, but I understand people's concerns about it. I absolutely do.
So we'll try to end in about 8 minutes. We'll get one more question in.
Yeah, sure.
Kevin Deland, I really want to hear your question. You had a few juicy ones. I know I'm saying juicy a lot for whatever reason, but
okay. Sure. How's it going, everyone? Hi, thanks, Anthony. I watched a bunch of your videos a few years ago. So.
Oh gosh. Maybe watch something more recent. Hopefully, I like to think it's changed a little bit since.
Okay, Anthony, are you doxastically open to the belief that there is no such thing as objective truth, or that trying to find something like objective truth is not like useful?
I'm open to both. I'm open to both ideas that maybe subjective truth is the best way to navigate the world for human beings. That hey, as long as you get value from it, and you're less stressed, as you're navigating the world. Like, I guess it all depends on what your values are. Like, if I value longevity and I don't want to get too far off our field, but yeah, I think I'm open to the idea that subjective truth might be more valuable than objective truth. There was a second piece to your question there. What was the other one?
Yeah. So, sorry, it's kind of dark here. The example you used earlier was like the box of Tic Tacs and knowing whether or not there is an even or odd number. And I think in my opinion, it's kind of a big stretch to say like, that knowing how many Tic Tacs are in a box can be extrapolated to things sort of like, what should be done, or what kind of prescriptive things, like we should have a value in objective truth. And one example I sort of thought of was, do you know it might be Thinking Fast and Slow, but the people, if you try and get people to like identify, like describe or draw the back of a penny with Abe Lincoln's face and like where the different things are, right? They don't really pick up on those little details, right? So to me, it seems like the Tic Tac box might be something trivial that is not really useful for people to know. Sorry, I don't know if that was a question, but do you have any thoughts on that?
I do. I mean, the Tic Tac test of asking people if they think the total number of pieces is either even or odd, and it can't simultaneously be both, is a very simple example to try to see if a person agrees that truth is objective. Maybe it's not the best example. I mean, I've used examples in the field where I said something like I met this one woman on the trail, and she was here from Poland or something. And she specifically wanted to see armadillos. And then we started talking, and she started going relativistic. She later asked me not to upload the video. So it tears me apart. But we started talking about armadillos and if she thinks that they're live bearers or egg layers. And she's like, I don't know I'm not sure. I'm like, I actually don't know what it is either. However, would you agree that it's one or the other and it can't be both? So you can still use real world examples. Like, for example, did Trump collude with Russia? Either he did or he didn't. Like, there's a factual matter to it, but it's hard to explore the quality of a person's reasons for thinking that something is true if they defer to the subjectivity of our reality. So, for example, a very good question we might ask somebody is like, the Hindu is just as confident that their God is real, and they also use faith to come to their conclusion. And for somebody who would answer the question about the Tic Tacs and say, it could both be even and odd simultaneously, when you ask them a question that we call the outsider test for faith, they will often say, well, the Hindu is correct and I'm correct. We're both correct that our gods are real, even though these are contradictory gods. And I think at least the Christian might say, well, there's only one God, whereas the Hindu might allow for the Christian God. So one thing that we're trying to do with SE, and sometimes it's a liability, maybe, but we're trying to take really complex topics and make them understandable so that we can discuss the beliefs that we're holding and the confidence that we're putting in the beliefs. Is it the best tool or the best example or the most realistic thing? No, but it's very simple, and it usually helps getting people thinking about these views of objective and subjective truth.
Yeah, thank you for your response.
Absolutely. I should probably say, probably after this, I don't want to take any. Peter, can people go somewhere after this talk to keep talking about this? Do you have a place for them? Or?
Yeah, we have a Discord that has video channels that you can.
Oh, beautiful.
Yeah. So
okay.
I'll put the link on.
Yes. If I'm not over there, because we'll be eating dinner soon, but there will more than likely be people from the SC community that will head over there to answer questions like that.
The Stoa is going to get invaded by the
Wouldn't you want that?
Yeah, I do.
Yeah, that's what we want. That's what we want. Yeah.
Yeah. So I'm going to close out in a moment. Is there any kind of thoughts you want to leave us with for the people who are listening on the recording and for people in the room right now?
I have any thoughts? I don't know. I mean, we're looking for outside perspectives to help make this better. I think that's been a continuing theme throughout this whole interview. Like, this was largely started in the atheist community, but we don't want it to stay there. Like, I think that could be the worst thing for street epistemology, to stay in cloistered into one tribe. Like, we want people from around if you're in Black Lives Matter, join the Street Epistemology server. If you're a Trump fan, join the Street Epistemology server. That would be my advice, is help us make this better and bring these tools to your tribes so that you can challenge them on the claims that they're making.
And two things that I'll kind of suggest as a potential collaboration with the Stoa and the SE. One thing, Edwin Rutsch, the guy who created empathy circles that Dan was talking about, he's going to come to the Stoa and he's going to do training, empathy circle training for the Stoa. And that's like a technique. It's like gamifies Carl Rogers' active listening, where you just repeat what the other person said in your own words so they feel understood, just to kind of build that listening, understanding muscle. So we're going to get training in that here. And I'm a fan of the SE technique. And that would be cool if there could be some kind of SE training for the Stoa village. That'd be very, because as you can kind of tell just from the questions that you're getting, we got a lot of juicy oddball people coming in this place. It's very delicious.
There's that word again.
Yeah, they come from just because the audience and the guests I have here, they're from all kind of the Medic tribal constellation. So we get pick all sorts of interesting people. So yeah, I would love to have some kind of training, even if it's informal.
Yeah, we have people from the community. I noticed Dolly's in here. He's been having, is it weekly, Dolly? Maybe just nod your head because I'm watching you. weekly training, he's nodding his head, weekly training sessions where people interested in this approach can practice street epistemology. There's an effort to develop a course so that we can, like a web app type of course for people to learn this approach. And then by all means, please watch the videos, like watching people talk about all different types of claims and having them explored where it's not getting heated, it's not getting contentious. The rabbit hole goes very deep for street epistemology, just let me put it that way. There are people who are very eager to teach you how to do this and help us make it better. Yeah.
And the other thing I and this is something we can talk offline, is having maybe some kind of like battle royale where people like Christians, Paul Vanderklay comes in, some SE comes in, and then they have display the method, have conversation back and forth.
I'm so glad that you mentioned that, because I've been talking to some of the people who've been involved in this community for a number of years. And I don't want to take credit for it, but I don't remember exactly who said it, but somebody has suggested, and I love this idea, like maybe the street epistemology community can be the place where people from these different mimetic tribes come to in order to bounce their ideas off of people. And you don't even necessarily have to know the approach. We might actually be able to assign a facilitator of some sorts where there can be an intermediary talking to the Black Lives Matter proponent and somebody from Antifa maybe, or something like that. I don't know. It's conceivable with the technology that we have and the ease with which we can communicate, where maybe we can bring these different groups together in these different SE communities and sort of hash these things out and maybe record it. Wouldn't that be cool to show people from these different tribes talking respectfully and making progress? Yeah,
totally. And if you ever want to use a Stoa as a prototype or, test something out, it's yours to do so.
Appreciate that.
I'll make some closing announcements, but Anthony, thanks so much for coming out today, my friend. That was fun.
Thank you, Peter, for having me on. It was a blast, honestly. Yeah. And I feel like I got a lot off my chest. And again, I haven't really thought it through all the way, but this has been really helpful in my own personal development. So thank you for having me.
Yeah, my pleasure. And that's what we love here, putting all of us at the edge of our thinking. So you can check out the Discord right there. You go to the rules, you have to give it a thumbs up, then you get access to all the channels, including the video channels. If you like what we're doing here at the Stoa, you can visit us on Patreon and give us some support. Upcoming events, we got one in 30 minutes, how to be a meta-modern thought leader, WTF with Jason Fox. It's at 8 p.m. Eastern time. Tomorrow, Deep Politics with Peter Dale Scott. He's a political scientist, and he talks about political practices and arrangements that, deliberate or not, that are usually repressed in public discourse rather than acknowledged. So this is deep politics, the deep state, kind of gets to conspiratorial territories, but from first principle thinking. Really excited about that, and you can RSVP here. Street Epistemologies, all are welcome to these events, so you can kind of challenge our speakers. That being said, thank you again, Anthony. Thank you, everyone, for coming out today. Wow.
Thank you. Bye all.